Hi and welcome. This is Dr. Matthew Dunn, host of The Future of Email Marketing. It's March 2021 and the sun's actually shining here in the Pacific Northwest. I'm delighted to actually get to know someone on a call. My guest today is Lars Helgeson, founder, CEO of GreenRope, also author of CRM for Dummies, and quite the world traveler, which hopefully we'll have time to talk about. Lars, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're both in the Northwest during this call, and you're probably like me, going, "Oh, what sunshine! Yay!"
Yeah.
Well, orient people a little bit. Tell us about GreenRope for starters. I want to ask about a bunch of other stuff because you got a fascinating background. But tell us about the company a bit.
So GreenRope actually is an evolution of a company that I started back in 2000 called Cooler Email,
Okay.
where we started in email marketing and then realized one of the big challenges that a lot of businesses face really has to do with understanding how much data is generated by all the different elements of a business.
Mm-hmm.
And so while email marketing is important, it really has to be thought of in the context of what's happening with the rest of the business. And
Yeah.
so rather than continuing to go down the path of developing more and more just email marketing focused tools,
Yeah.
we decided to start over with the CRM. And so the CRM is sort of the core. And then we built the email marketing component around what the needs are for businesses in the use of their CRM.
Right.
So
Right. So
typically,
email is just one of the ways you might connect with people, but certainly not the only one, and it's not what you're all about.
right. And email I guess way back in the day, it was thought of mainly as a marketing tool, usually for client retention. The people that used it for client acquisition and spamming are the evil people that we try to stay away from.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
email is used by everybody. It's
Yeah.
it's used by salespeople. It's used by obviously the marketing team. But you've got customer service people. You have event people. A lot of people that are interacting, HR people, all in your business using email to communicate.
Yeah. Yeah.
So because it's such an important medium for communication, non necessarily marketing related,
Right.
you need to come up
All
with
sorts of communication. And your platform handles SMS as well, if I recall right. Yes?
it does. Yep.
Yeah. When did that come into the mix?
That was a few years ago. We have a partnership with Twilio for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
We do SMS, we do MMS, we do voice broadcast, and we do telephony. So in and outbound calling and recording and transcription. Um,
Okay. Yeah. So you really are getting all of that data. So I'm going to guess that much of what GreenRope does fits under the umbrella that I know that you talk about, complete CRM.
mhm.
Want to give people a nickel education on that?
Yeah, it really goes back to the traditional expectation of what CRM means, and part of it is because if you ask 10 people what they think of CRM, you're going to get 10 different answers.
Yeah.
So my idea about CRM is that the relationship is more than just a sales type of relationship, which is sort of the traditional way going back, 30, 40 years where did CRM come from? It was really a sales tool.
Yeah.
But the relationship has changed a lot over the years, where you have relationships that are driven by your website, by your online advertising, offline advertising. I mean, nowadays, a lot of things are done with QR codes. How much are you tracking that? You've got like we were talking before with telephony and messaging and social media. You've got all these different things that are interacting with your leads and your customers. And all of those things need to be kept somewhere, or you're not making decisions based on actual data.
Right.
So if you don't understand your market, and I mean, and especially with the younger generations, they don't necessarily like to use email as much.
Yeah.
So how do you communicate with them, and how do you get that data stored in your CRM so you can actually use it? And so that's one of the big things that I really try to help businesses understand is really you have to take a step back and look at your customer journey, understand what people are going to be using to communicate with you and how are you going to communicate with them, because the medium is going to be all over the place. You're going to have email,
Yeah.
obviously, but you've got, like I was
Phone
mentioning
calls.
before, all the other things. You got video, you've got text
Yeah.
messaging, you've got,
Yeah.
there's all these other methods. So how do you keep track of all of that? And
Yeah.
then how do you leverage your tools to automate the things that you can automate
Yeah.
and bring all of that together? So that's complete CRM is really about understanding all those different channels and pulling them together in a single unified platform.
In one place, right?
Right.
Yeah. Not that's a non-trivial challenge.
That's true.
And I mean, you guys have been in business for a pretty long stretch, if I recall right from the company profile. But uh, how do you rate yourself? Like, how does GreenRope do against your vision of what you want it to do?
Well, so the answer is always going to be it depends on the client. Um, the idea, though, is if you have a single platform that does all of those things,
Mm-hmm.
then the challenge to the business is much, much less on the implementation side,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Because the devil's always in the details when it comes to CRM, right? Because you can go to a CRM company and they will promise you, well, yeah, of course our software can do that. You just need to buy all these different things and hire all these developers and make
Yeah.
sure your data doesn't collide and make
Yeah.
sure you don't run into our API limits and make sure,
Yeah.
And as a small business, that's not what you do. The business wants to focus on doing their business. They don't want to be software managers. They don't want to be developer managers. Trust me, that's what I do. It's a pain.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, you want to let the companies run the software that helps them do what they need to do without having to rely so much on very expensive assets like IT staff developers and creating that complexity of what's happening with the data. And on top of that, you have the complexity that goes along with things like GDPR and CCPA
Right.
and data privacy and protection. And you think about a lot of companies have their software, their client data sitting in 4, 5, 6 different platforms.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Each of those platforms represents a vector for losing data, which is catastrophic. Like, I mean, you even think about what happened with Microsoft and, with the SolarWinds hack and now with the
Sage hack.
hack, I mean, they're huge problems.
Yeah.
And so what we want to do is help companies minimize that by simplifying the way they run all of their operations. So you put everything in one platform and you don't have to rely on, or you don't have the same risk of one of maybe 10 different applications getting hacked and losing your data that way. So it's a combination of privacy, simplicity, and power, and security. So by bringing all those things together in one system, you really simplify all of that, and it helps you really run your business with the right tools used at the right time for the right people.
And a real cumulative, that cumulative view of your market and your customers, I would guess, gets more and more valuable over time, because the problem you alluded to of 5 and 6 is a small number, 10, 12, 20 different systems with fragments of, this is a web log and that's the email marketing system. And this over here is how I actually send email to people that it's all over the place.
Right.
And you end up keeping it in your head or on a paper napkin or something like that, which doesn't scale very well. Right.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Huh. That's you touched on something that's always interesting to talk with technology and platform folks about, which is this rising tide of awareness about privacy and control over our own data, and finally some legislation to say, wait a minute, maybe we shouldn't let it just be the wild west, and maybe people should have a voice in what's stored about them. Any comments about where you guys are headed?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it really comes down to the company owning the data and not relying on other systems. Like, I mean, I think that's very tempting for companies to think, well, I'm going to run all my ads through Facebook and LinkedIn, and I'm going to do all my communication through Facebook Messenger or maybe LinkedIn Messenger, email, whatever, which is okay. The problem is the moment that the algorithms change by those companies, and the moment they decide to cut you off because they think you're violating some terms, whatever. I mean, regardless of your political affiliation, clearly we have seen how other technology companies will shut off other companies like Parler, where they don't believe they're in alignment with their standards. So regardless of whether you feel like you would ever be in a position like that, it's still a risk. Your data is still sitting with someone else. Whereas if you have your marketing data, your email traffic data, your web analytics data, all of that on a platform that's not going to do something like that, where you've got potentially a massive company that could come in and just say, well, we're going to bury you now just because we want to. It's a risk mitigation strategy for a business to think about, where is my data and who owns it? And the more you actually own. And so that's why a CRM is so important, because that's your data.
Yeah.
You own that. You
Yeah.
own the history of who are those contacts. What do you know about them between their name, their email address, but also their behavioral history? Have they opened up emails that
Yeah.
you've sent? What emails
Yeah.
have you sent? When did they answer surveys? Have they watched videos? Have they
Yeah.
called you? I mean, all this data that you want to own as a business. You don't want that sitting and relying on some other platform, a social media platform that can
Yeah.
very easily take that away from you.
Where it seems to me in a way where we're maturing a bit as digital becomes normal and part of life in distinguishing things that we kind of lumped together before. I mean, there's a point in time when someone would say, I'm trying to think of a good example. My dad, no longer with us unfortunately, used to go to Google to search for websites instead of typing in the URL.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a perfectly understandable shortcut, but Google's accumulating a whole lot of data and frankly centralization and power in
Mm-hmm.
that equation. And now we're starting to distinguish. Wait a minute, Facebook owns that; they could shut me off,
Mm-hmm.
as you said. We went through the kind of delicate office debate about, do we want to keep hosting our own email for just for inboxes, or do we want to put it on G Suite, or do we want to put it on Office 365 or something like that? If we do, who owns it, who controls the domain, those sorts of things. Like we're finally starting to get a little internalize a little more sense of those underlying ownership, control, longevity issues
Mm-hmm.
that you touched on, instead of just saying it's bits and bytes. So as long as somebody does it, that's okay. Companies didn't think of this stuff as an asset. And now it's absolutely critical asset.
Yeah, and I think the risk of loss now is getting pretty. It's significant. People are seeing what can happen.
Yeah.
Whether it's a phishing attack, identity theft, theft, like taking.
Locked up machines with a bounty on them.
Yeah, I mean it's a frightening place. It's a scary world out there. There's a lot of people who have a lot of resources and are happy to come after you for whatever it is that they think they can take from you. And so you have to think in terms of worst case scenario,
Mm,
and that's why I think you can't understate how important it is to really have a lock on where all of your data is sitting.
right.
How is it protected? Is it encrypted? How many other people have access to it? One of the things I hear, a common thing with CRMs is there's per user pricing.
Right.
And so companies will often have their employees share logins to
Yeah.
save money,
Yeah.
because they think, well, I'll save $100 a month or whatever, $200 a month.
Yeah.
And so I can get away with more by saved some money by having 4 or 5 people share a login, which is absolutely disastrous. I mean, as far as accountability, security, I mean, there's so many bad things that go with that. It's
Yeah.
one of the reasons why we at GreenRope, actually, we don't charge per user. We only charge per contact.
Really interesting. Interesting.
Yeah, because I don't want that to be a calculation that anyone ever has to make. It should always be something predictable in terms of cost for managing how much what does it take for you to secure your data.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
we
Oh,
made that
interesting.
decision.
Good for you. Good for you. It's not easy. It's a sidebar conversation, but it's not easy to figure out a pricing model with all the complexity under the hood of a digital service of some sort. It's not easy to figure out where you hang the price tag
Mhm.
sometimes. And some of the conventional things like per seat, which has been around forever, right? Like
Yeah.
it penalizes behaviors, and you see not necessarily effective choices. You lose data and knowledge if 5 people are sharing a login, because you can't distinguish their interactions from
Right.
each other almost by definition right there. And you don't think that's important, but it's probably quite critical. Wait, who talked to the Acme account? Oh, well, we were sharing a login, so we don't know.
Right. And that
Yeah.
happens more than you'd like to admit in other companies out there, which is one of the things we want to simplify that. The other thing that we've kind of made the choice about is not to charge per feature. So the only thing that we charge in addition is for the network costs to do the SMS and the telephony, like those
Sure.
those kinds of things we just pass on. But
Yeah, sort of
um,
tangible cost.
we don't charge, like we have a learning management system, we have a project management system, we have a survey tool, and a event management system, all these different things that are built
Wow.
into our CRM that we
Wow.
don't charge for.
Yeah.
And which is in stark contrast to most other CRMs out there. I know that Microsoft CRM's pricing manual is 26 pages long. If you got to read a 26-page document to figure out how much they're going to bill you, there's obviously there's a risk of something being a miscalculation. But I think it's, people like things that are simple.
Yeah.
And I want everyone, I mean, especially our customers, but everyone should be able to have access to the tools that they need and not have to make that decision of, well, I could save $20 a month or $50 a month or $100 a month if I used this other separate software, that would be able to do this function. And then, if it's a separate piece of software, then you've got to figure out the API connections and the cost to build the connections there. And what happens if there's a data collision. For us, because we do all that internally, I don't want that to be a decision that someone has to make of thinking, well, is it worth it for me to pay an additional X dollars a month for me to be able to have access to the project manager or to the learning management system or the event management system? Because all that data should feed into the CRM.
The CRM, yeah. That's it. I mean, it's a substantial bar you set for yourself in fulfilling all of those functions for a company. Any comments on how you get there and stay there and keep up?
It's hard.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. I mean, there are companies that's all they do. There are companies that all they do is project management.
Right.
Companies all they do is learning management. And event management tools. I mean, there are focused tools in those different industries.
Any vertical.
Yeah, but it's funny because I just read an article. There's a guy named Chuck Schaefer who's I've worked with him for a long time, but he just wrote an article about RFPs and CRMs.
Oh, really?
And it was really interesting because he said, and we've seen this, where people think about what they need for their CRM and they think very feature focused. I need a CRM that does X, Y, and Z, and they think, I need to be able to do this with it, and rather than thinking about how they're actually going to use it and what the output is going to be, they think in terms of, I need this feature. And the reality is that users of CRMs typically and on average use 30% of the capability of the CRM.
Yeah.
Because so much of this other capability stuff, that the features that they ask for, they never use. It's just something that they think that they need that sounds good, or that, someone maybe have mentioned it in a meeting or something, and they say, oh, we need to have that.
Or it works for this particular niche industry, but maybe not many others. And then one of your dilemmas, one of my dilemmas, running a software company, is trying to make a sensible, user guided choice about what gets the work and the focus, because you can't do it all, and it becomes unusable if you do it all. And that's a disaster as well. Yeah, not a trivial challenge. I mean, as soon as you say CRM, of course, there's a Salesforce shaped cloud out there on the horizon, and I've got to say, I'm not knocking Salesforce. I used it years ago, but I don't think you could pay me enough to sit down at a desk and say I've got to use it all day now. Like it just made me nuts. It was almost incomprehensible and didn't help me get work done.
Yeah, I mean, Salesforce isn't bad if you're a Fortune 1000 company and you can hire a system integrator to design it and make it work exactly how you want.
Exactly, for your business, yeah.
Right, because the platform is very powerful, but it requires so much engineering work to make it work. It's not worth it if you're an SMB. Yeah. You can do everything that you need in something for a fraction of the cost. I mean, it literally will cost at least 20 times more to do it that way on Salesforce.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, it's really more of a toolkit for consultants to design your CRM than a CRM that you'd fire up and use out of the box. Yeah, yeah.
Right. And a good CRM should allow you to customize it to meet what you need without the use of developer resources. You should be able to make it work.
Lovely idea.
And I know we're talking a lot about email here, but because that email communication has to be tracked and managed through all those different interaction points.
Yeah.
You think about the complexity of where are you going to store the email communication that comes out of all the different things that you do. Right. You've got the simple newsletters that you might send out, but what happens when you have the sales enablement process, where you have a salesperson that needs to trigger a drip campaign or a series of logic driven messages that are personalized to their target and do lead nurturing that way. Where does that data, how does it get executed? Where is it stored? What happens with, where do you track what people do with those emails?
Yeah.
And then you think about things like email or event management. So, what happens if you're going to if you host a Zoom webinar, where's that data going to go? And how are you going to keep track of the people that register or attend? And so you want to have a single tool that unifies all that together and doesn't have the complexity of, well, we're going to have to buy this software and link it, and we're going to buy this software and link it, and then it turns into big.
Yeah, and you'll never actually make a coherent view out of those different packages. Yeah, it's a totally sensible argument. In some ways, it seems to me that's the huge enterprise size target that Microsoft is starting to aim at now in this post Satya Nadella Azure centric Microsoft, not the Office and Windows version of the company, but I think what they call it, global computer or something like that. Like they're bidding fair to have enterprise scale companies do that kind of thing across all of those myriad touch points. Although there will definitely be some high paid consultants involved.
Oh, for sure.
And getting the job done.
Yeah, it was really funny. I was here in Bellevue to speak at a conference a couple of years ago, and there was a VP of marketing from Microsoft that was the keynote speaker. And he stood up there and he talked about this grand vision that Microsoft had to someday be able to combine web analytics data and email marketing data in the same system. And I thought, is this the great vision? Because I know of at least 20 companies that did this 10 years ago,
including yours, probably.
Yeah, including ours. But I mean, companies like HubSpot has done this for, they're on the same track as us. MailChimp even has done this for many years, and so it's interesting how I think the enterprise space just thinks about things a little bit differently than the SMB space, which is kind of where we've stayed focused.
Yeah, they do. And enterprise. I've got enterprise software, including Microsoft, on the resume in the background. It's a very different target and a very different mindset, and critically, the decision maker isn't always the user, which in case of SMB is they're much more likely to get yelled at by the user. This CIO choosing a platform for thousands of people in the company through a lengthy RFP process. Like, you're a long ways away from the desk where this is actually going to get, fired up and used. And you are trying to solve a scale problem that's really quite different as well. But and at the same time, now we're at the stage where even a small business has an appetite for, I want the tools like the big guys, the digital tools like the big guys, right? It's reasonable for a small business to say, you know what, I'd like a single view of the customer, and I'd like my service and my sales and my marketing to all dot back to the same place. Man, that would have been science fiction not that long ago.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool. That's
it's a game changer for a business to have everyone in the same platform.
Yeah.
That's a big part of our platform, is a support ticketing management system. And
really,
when you have customer service people interacting with the same platform that the salespeople, now a salesperson can go into a contact record, someone that they're trying to sell, and they can see a history of every support ticket that's ever opened up, every chat that's ever been made between them and a customer service person.
Wow. They
can see a history of course, of all the email traffic and the web analytics data, the videos watched, the surveys answered, the forms filled out, the calls made in and out, text messaging, the events they've attended, the webinars they've attended, all of that automatically synced together into one system. And that's what we want. We built that, but we want to help companies get to the point where they are everyone in the company is using that all together.
Wow.
And you can do things like lead scoring that cross across all those different channels. So you could say, if I'm a salesperson and I want to do lead scoring and I want to find out who my most interested leads are right now, maybe I have half an hour and I got to make a call to a couple people. I'm going to target the people who are most interested in. Now we can do scoring and see across all those different channels who is the most engaged. And that kind of insight really helps a salesperson be better at sales. And
Yeah.
conversely, if you have a marketing person who can see across all those channels and they
Yeah.
can see what's actually driving interaction, what are the statistical correlations between these different actions and conversions,
Yeah.
you're not just measuring, because everyone thinks about that in terms of email and web stuff.
Yeah.
But once you start to take into consideration the phone, text messaging, these support ticketing issues, the live chat interactions, the webinars, once you pull all that together,
Yeah.
now you have a picture of who your leads are. Now you can understand consumer behavior. If you're
Right.
just going off of web and who's on your web page and what they did with your emails, you have a sliver of a picture,
Yeah.
and you're not going to make the right decision, and you can't target people. You can't really personalize from just that interaction, because there's a lot more to the relationship than what did they do with my email and were they on my web page.
Well, and agreed. That's I love the perspective. It also seems to me that a lot of companies end up with a better view of their prospects than their customers, right? Because if you've got the somewhat conventional approach, and I'll get this email marketing system, this web analytics system, this for my sales guys, this for my customer service, or
Mm.
help desk or whatever, all
Yeah.
separate, right? You end up with a ton of data at the sort of front end prospecting
Hmm.
and sales, and it almost never gets transferred over or
Yeah.
correlated right into the view of, oh wait, these guys are actually paying us, these are our live customers. That the service and support that you mentioned doesn't always have a voice about the customers, when in fact they're the ones keeping things rolling with your real live paying customers.
Right. Right.
How
Exactly.
do you help people grapple with the data, overwhelming amount of data, and turn that into not just noise but a signal?
Well, you have to understand the customer journey, because you're accumulating all that data. And the key is you have various different user stories inside your organization.
Hmm.
You have marketers who are going to use that data differently than a salesperson, who's going to use that differently than a support person.
Hmm.
And so you look at how your users are going to be interacting with the platform. And that's actually how we designed the system, was around those functional areas. So
Okay.
if you have a salesperson, you think about how are they going to, what sort of data do they need to see? They need to see their pipeline. They need to see their overall statistics. They need to see what's coming up in their schedule and things like that. Marketing people are using things a little bit differently. So they have different kinds of reports that they're going to use. They're doing different types of campaign optimization and personalization tools.
Hmm.
So in each of the elements, at least in our system, they're designed around the actual use case of the user. And
Okay.
so when you go in, you can very easily go and find the data that you need, pick it out, and do the analysis or do the writing or do whatever it is that you need to do.
Yeah.
Um, and so, but a lot of that comes down to education, educating users,
Hmm.
and it comes down to really understanding your target market and how are you going to be interacting with your target market. And so there's very much education is a really big component around what we do, partially because we do things a little bit differently in that everything is all integrated. So we like everyone to understand where they fit in the puzzle.
Yeah.
I don't like organizations where you put somebody in a corner and all they do is their little job and they don't think about how they impact the rest of the organization. I don't
Yeah.
think anybody likes to work that way. I mean, I'm sure maybe some people do, but I think everyone wants to feel like they're contributing and part of a team,
Yeah.
and they want to see that impact that they're making. And I think siloing software is going to do the same thing as siloing a person, where
Well put. Well put.
they're working in their little corner and they're
Yeah.
generating data in their little corner or in this little software piece where that data doesn't really go anywhere. And the relevance of that data really is not, it's not very high, because it's stuck in a little environment where only a few people can use it. And
Right.
so we want to help companies broaden the way they see all of the data that they're generating and not get lost in it. But like you said, find the signal through the noise. What do they need to pull out, and then be able to extract that data and use it? And so, like I said, there's a lot of training that's involved, because not every business is the same. And
Yeah.
so we need to
No.
help encourage and coach that through.
Ah, nice. That's a heck of a bold. Uh, it's a bold agenda. Actually, I really like it. I've got a young friend who runs a photography business, a wedding photography. She does very well at it, but she adopted a platform called 17 Hats when she first launched it,
Mhm.
And she said, I love this. It's everything. It's my sales. It's my e-commerce. It's my CRM, etc. And I'm not familiar with the platform, but I remember she said, this thing just saves me time because I'm not running around between all of these boxes. It's
Right.
all in one place. I'm like, that's
Yeah.
pretty cool. Yeah. Sounds like
Yeah.
similar, probably smaller scale.
Yeah, exactly. So that's great. I mean, to have a tool like that, and when it's written for the entrepreneur, the startup,
Yeah.
the one person job, they don't need the advanced tools.
Yeah.
They can, the automation, the predictive analytics. Like she's not going to go in and do all that analysis
Right. Right. Right.
because it's not really her. I mean, she's so relationship driven, and it's her by herself, right? But as you start to scale up, if she was an organization of say 5 or 10 people,
Yeah.
where you have management layers that need to watch over and take the, monitor what's everybody doing,
Yeah.
what do my funnels look like?
Yeah.
It's a different kind of an animal. It's a different kind it's a different problem, and it needs a different tool.
Yeah. What's the tell me a bit about the market for your company, size of customers, types of businesses, what do they look like?
We are all over the place. So
Really?
we have startups, we have government organizations,
Wow.
we have universities. We're in 40 different countries.
Wow.
So we're spread out all kinds of different industries, applications, from manufacturing to transportation and logistics to law firms to agencies, ad agencies, marketing consulting firms. I mean,
Wow.
all over the place. So. And the nice thing is that we scale up to, I mean, some of our organizations, you're talking about a government organization that has hundreds of users,
Yeah.
hundreds of thousands of contacts that they're managing. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a different type of a solution. I mean, it's the same software,
Yeah.
but it's set up differently than say a small company that has 2 or 3 people that's using it in different ways.
I see. Wow. That's a heck of a range to cover with design and development as you continue to evolve the product.
Yeah,
Eesh.
it is. It makes things. I mean, I think you understand how hard it is to make something that can handle something that's so complex, also not intimidating to a startup.
Yeah.
Because if somebody comes in and there's maybe 1, 2, or 3 people working in the company, then how do they use the same platform
Yeah.
as a company that has hundreds of users?
Hundreds of users. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we
No,
but we
that
support both. So we have clients
wow.
in that whole spectrum,
And
and
you said you said 40 countries, so you've had to grapple with multiple languages
Mhm.
in the user user interface, user experience as well.
Yep, yep.
Documentation too?
Yeah, the documentation is mostly, I think we've got English, German, Spanish, and Russian
Okay.
right now.
Okay.
So, but and for the rest of that, it's Google Translates.
I hear you. We actually just went through the localization of our component for that sits in email editors, puts real time content inside the email editor, and we had enough demand to localize that. Localizing being the software term, if you don't do software all day, localizing it, have it speak different languages so users aren't lost and all stuck looking at English, which is our little bit of imperialism. Thank you, internet. And it's non-trivial to get all that stuff right and tight and meaningful. It's not non-trivial.
Yeah, I mean, we go through. I mean, things like tickets.
Yeah.
Like a support ticket
Oh,
is
support
different
ticket.
than a train ticket.
Yes.
Different words
Yes. Yeah.
in different languages.
And you can't just drop a single word or two. Yeah, God bless Google Translate, but you can't just drop a single word in there and expect it to get it right. There's no context. Like your ticket your ticket example is right on the mark. I mean, you mentioned Russia and a couple of other domains. Do you have to keep data in place for some customers?
Yeah, we do.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's a little tricky. The privacy shield is something that has
Yeah.
has been a big issue. The Maybe your listeners may not be aware that so GDPR was a big thing for protecting the security and privacy of data for European citizens.
Yep.
And a big part of that was the Privacy Shield program, which was something that an agreement between the EU and the United States that would say that if we had data in the United States and we as a company were willing to sign up and say, yes, we will protect European citizens' data. We will not share it. And you can trust us. And we're willing to put our company's reputation and brand and money on the line and say, we will not sell your data.
Right. Right.
European courts struck that entire agreement down because they recognized that our intelligence agencies are taking the data from the transatlantic cable and sniffing it, whatever you want to call it. But the data is no longer secure. They don't believe that the data is secure in transit between the EU and the United States because of that known, whatever that term is, sniffing, I guess, but taking that data in transit away. And so, which has caused us a fair amount of headache. The Privacy Shield program is still in place, even though the EU courts have struck it down. And so, we try to, obviously we encrypt all of our data in transit and everything, but, now things have to be done over there, and they can't be transmitted from over there to here and still be in compliance. Anyway, and you think about all the other things like, you got Australia and New Zealand, Singapore, and South America, and everyone's all over the place. So we have to be very cognizant of that, and it's a lot of work.
That's a big lift. And are you guys do you sit on top of a commercial cloud, AWS, Google Cloud, something like that? Run your own?
Yeah, we have all of our own.
Wow, good for you.
All of our own metal.
That's that takes work.
Yes,
and the redundancy and generators and all the other stuff. I'm guessing you do a lot of co-location just in terms of hosting facilities. But wow, your own metal, good for you. I haven't done that in a while.
Yeah.
For what we're up to, I'm like cloud. Yeah, okay, good. We're good with that. But it comes with its own cost.
Yeah, there's pluses and minuses.
Yeah.
The days when we have to buy hard drives, we still have to buy hard drives. So, you're on the cloud, you don't have to buy hard drives. They just put you on a different box and you don't notice.
No, they just send you a bigger bill, and then
right.
How much? How much does this storage cost me again? Whoa, hang on a minute. Let me do the math on that one. Yeah,
we do a lot of computationally intensive work too, especially for some of the scoring and predictive analytics tools that we have. And so, if we were to put that on the cloud, the amount of CPU usage would probably scale things. It would make it very expensive.
That's I don't have the math background to be an honest to God data scientist, but the rapid evolution of big data. I know that's last year's phrase. Rapid evolution of big data and the growth of tools to start making meaning out of all of that stuff is. That's pretty darn fascinating. What do you think of Salesforce buying Tableau?
I think it's a good for them. I think it's a good combination. It's again, you're buying. It's more of an enterprise level solution.
Yeah.
Tableau is very powerful software.
Yeah.
But you got to know how to use it.
If
you're not a data scientist, and to be honest, most small to mid-sized businesses don't really. They're not there. No. The problem is actually accumulating the data in the first place.
Yes.
If you're doing all that analytics on a sliver of the data, you may really understand that data, but you don't understand your customer.
Yeah.
And that's really where we try to focus, is to help the businesses truly understand their customer, because that's what makes companies live or die.
Yeah. You're absolutely right.
All the data analytics in the world did not save Toys R Us or Sears or Kmart.
Yeah, good point. Or Pier 1, or we could keep ticking down.
Yeah.
Ticking down the list. And then by contrast, you talk about the companies that haven't made the curve. You said you're in Seattle now. I watch with no small degree of awe as Amazon continues to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And I think, God, they know a lot about me. Oh my word. Sure. I've got an Amazon account from '97. They know a lot about me.
Yeah.
And now in the middle of pandemic, when people are like, oh, I need groceries and this, and like more and more stuff coming from them, I'm thinking, wow, that's got to be an incredible first time problem, the scale that they're working at.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it is amazing. It is truly amazing. I mean, like or dislike Amazon for what they
Yeah. Yeah.
do or how they do it. Truly, from an engineering perspective, it is incredible what they
It's
have been
yeah.
managed, what they have been able to build.
It's just yeah, it's just stunning. It's like even if you did a freeze frame on or said I'm going to stop being a customer or something like that, there's still a ton to learn
Hmm.
from how they've done that, and at the evolutionary pace, like the pace of growth
Hmm.
that they've had in the past few years.
But a
Um,
good CRM platform should help a small business be able to capitalize on those same data streams too. It's
yeah,
not, I mean, for as impressive as what Amazon and Google and Microsoft what they have been able to do at the enterprise level, a small business should be able to take advantage of similar types of tools. I mean, it's not at the same scale, obviously, but if you can gather that data together and
yeah,
really, because it's really about understanding your market, it's really about understanding how to best serve your customer. And Amazon has done an incredible job at knowing how to serve their customer.
yeah, yeah,
A
for sure.
small business can do the same thing if
Yeah,
they're able to pull that same kind of data in.
yeah,
Amazon is continually paying attention to how people are using their app, how they're on their website, what are they ordering,
yeah.
their delivery times, their supply chain, I mean, all that stuff, but that's all driven by analytics.
Hmm.
A small business can do the same thing if they have the right software.
Well, and I mean, it's interesting. It wouldn't have occurred to me as an analogy, but in some ways, what the core proposition, the thesis you're talking about for GreenRope is it's like get your own Amazon, right? One of the things about Amazon is they do have my shopping and my buying and my returning and like they've got all of that in one
Right.
spot. And
Right.
and that's you're saying do the same thing for a small medium sized business. Think the same way, like
Mhm.
the complete life cycle of your interactions, your long term life with the customers that actually make your business run.
Yeah, and I think another similar analogy is like Zillow, right? Zillow has really expanded in the real estate market.
Yeah.
And first, they were just sort of like a convenient MLS, but now they're doing loans, they're doing transactions, they're doing. I mean, they're replacing realtors,
Yeah.
and by understanding the entire customer journey and replacing it with software almost exclusively. And it's an interesting case study in how it's transforming an industry through technology, through that integration of the user journey and so customer journey. So each of us, if we think in terms of, well, how do we address the customer journey? Are we looking at just a very specific piece of a customer's journey and doing whatever it is they're trying to do?
Hmm.
Or are we trying to sell something that can really address the entire customer journey? And then do we have the software to track them as they go all the way through those steps?
Right.
So from initially finding out what it is that you do, to making the decision, to having them actually purchase from you through fulfillment, and then eventually turning them into advocates for your brand. How do you use software to track that entire journey? And that's what we want to do with one piece of software. We
Yeah.
should be able to do that.
I wouldn't have thought of Zillow, but you're right. They really have. They bought Redfin a while back, and it started giving them broker footprint. But yeah, they really are starting to change that industry that didn't want to change for a very long time.
Right.
Of course, there's no houses available, so I don't know if it's
Right.
becoming academic or what. At least there aren't here. And
Yeah.
everybody I talk to say, "Yep, no inventory." When you talk to a realtor,
Yeah.
it's kind of fascinating. Um, Dot back to email, since nominally that's what we're going to talk about at some point. Dot back to email for a second, because you started as an email company. How have you seen that particular channel um, evolve for both customers using your customers using email to communicate with their customers and that end user experience as well of what do I use email for?
Yeah, the evolution really has been in targeting and making sure the message is relevant and timely.
Hmm.
And that really has come in with the integration. I mean, we still do email newsletters and making sure that the content is relevant, and the deer or whatever, but also in the nurturing campaigns, so that when somebody first comes in, if they're interested in it, from our perspective, we use it obviously for when people are interested in using our CRM.
Mm-hmm.
We tailor the message that they receive to what role they play and what sort of industry that they're in, because
So
they're
a
going to
high
have
level of personalization.
Right. And that's very important, I think, for every business. The whole customer journey needs to track the need of the customer. The customer really, I mean, it really comes first. But if someone comes to you and they say, I'm interested in using your product or service because of X,
Hmm.
and then you send them an email that says, hey, aren't we so great at Y? They look at that and say, well, you're not listening to me. I'm going to go find another customer, another company, a vendor
Right.
who will. And so what we want to do is help people understand, help businesses understand how to manage all of that. So that when somebody comes in, you're keeping track of where they're coming from. And that's truly the evolution of email, is that message being absolutely targeted to that person's interest.
Hmm.
And so using things, even things as simple as when you do ads on Google, the ad on Google that you put on the AdWords, whatever, the campaign, if that language on the landing page doesn't match the ad that they click on, you're losing 30% of your audience simply because the language doesn't match in using the same key phrases, keywords, whatever.
Hmm.
The same goes with the follow-up emails, the follow-up messaging that you're sending.
Hmm.
That personalization has to do with, well, what campaign did they come from? Did they come from the campaign that was interested in that, where you were talking about this particular feature or this particular messaging or this particular target market segment, whatever it was? That consistent message
Hmm.
is what gets people to engage. People have been using email now too long for you to rely on spam or this generic target blasting approach
Yeah. Yeah.
to your messaging to get them to do stuff. They're
Yeah.
just used to, they've seen the Nigerian Prince email now 5,000 times. They're not going to buy it.
Well, and
So,
and dear first name
mhm,
does not move the just doesn't move the dial anymore. Like, yeah, I know how that's done. I literally don't see it.
right.
It's like don't bother. Seriously, don't bother with that.
Right. And that's why you want to be able, with the targeting, you want the messaging to reflect what you know about the customer. And
Hmm.
so we use what we call it in our system is dynamic data, meaning that we know that if someone is interested in, say, the marketing element of our CRM,
Hmm.
the message that they get in the follow-up puts the marketing related information at the top, because we know they're marketers, they're interested in marketing. If someone's coming from sales, we put the sales at the top. So, because we want the above the fold content to be relevant to what they're looking for. Every single business can and should do this. They should think in terms of, where are people coming from and what are they going to be interested in, and how do I send the content to them that's going to resonate with them at the top of the message that they receive, so that they feel like we're listening to you and we have a solution for you. And so,
We're always in a bit of a struggle with, let's call it, marketing uses of communication technology, but to reconcile scale and personalization. To say, I'll talk this way to marketing folks, this way to people who are looking for a service solution. We're still doing some grouping kinds of decisions, right? We're
mhm,
not truly tailoring a one-to-one, because you don't have time to sit down. You can't sit down and write a single message to every single prospect. And at the same time, we're trying to look like we did. Fair?
mhm.
And it's
Yeah.
it's like it's a constant resource management design tension
Mhm.
to get those two things to reconcile. It seems like
Yeah,
we're getting better at it.
yeah, it's really about doing your homework first. The idea is you set up your automation sequences first, and
Mhm.
you think about, when someone goes through the customer journey, what do you know about them, and how are you going to personalize based on what you do know?
Mhm.
Do you send a different message to males versus females, high income versus low income, people
Right.
in a particular geographic area or not, people
Right.
that are interested in a certain product or not?
Mhm.
So you put all those rules into the content, and then also you can put them into the timing of the messaging itself. So you can say, well, if this person's interested in this particular thing, maybe they're going to be more likely to buy sooner, so we're going to increase the cadence of the messages that we
Mhm.
send to them.
Mhm.
Whereas if we're talking about selling maybe to engineers that have a long sales cycle on a particular product, they're more thoughtful, they're going to be a little bit more left brain, they're going to be more analytical. So the messaging is going to be different, and maybe we're going to space them out a little bit further.
Hmm.
So understanding your target market will there's and then having automation based around things that they do. So if you want to wait until someone does a certain thing, like maybe you send them an email and you're going to wait until they fill out a form before you trigger something else,
Trigger the next one. Yeah. Yeah.
or you wait until they click on a link, or you wait till they watch a video, or whatever it is, that you have
Yeah.
that logic built into that personalization.
Yeah.
When you understand the customer journey, you can build that first. Once you do that, then you start sending people down those journeys, and you wait to see then what's happening when they do. You start to generate data, and you start to see, okay, well, we're seeing people are taking this action, or they're not taking this action, and then you really start to learn about your customer. But that's you're building a system,
Mm-hmm.
and that really is the special sauce that a business is going to create,
Mm-hmm.
because you're generating knowledge, you're generating intelligence about how customers are interacting with your brand. And maybe that means you modify your brand, maybe it means you modify the way you talk to people. But in any case, you're molding your business around your customers, and not just trying to hammer them. If I send them 20 emails a day for the next week, they're going to buy my thing.
Yeah.
It's not going to work that way. You have to be listening, and we all know what that's like to deal with companies that aren't listening, and the frustration points that we're at, so that we have with them. So that's what we want to build, is this ecosystem, this business intelligence driven way of interaction.
That's I like the way you put that. Yeah, and it's much more about listening. Businesses tend to buy, broad statement, not fair. Businesses tend to buy uh, stuff that talks more than they buy stuff that listens, because it looks like it's going to do something. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I still cringe about companies that invest zillions of dollars in make it up to make the point, email marketing, and then they spend diddly on their content. I'm like, I don't care if the tool can send out a billion. If it's a bad message, who cares what the tool can do? Because the guy getting the message doesn't care what you use to send it. He cares what he sees
Yeah.
and reads.
Yeah, I had this same conversation a few years ago with a guy that worked for Sweet Tomatoes. They were using, I think, an Oracle product and spending a huge amount of money on the product.
Yeah.
And their messaging was not effectively reaching out to their audience and driving people to their restaurants, and now they're closed.
Yeah.
Which is too bad, because I think it could have been avoided. But I think big companies will hold on to this big technology, these big providers, because they think bigger is always better.
Well, and it becomes there's a rule, and I forget the name of the rule. I just read it the other day. There's a rule that says institutions will actually fight to preserve the fight to preserve the problem that they address. And I think the same is true same becomes true of systems, particularly if they're expensive. Well, we bought a big widget system, so we must really have a widget problem. Well, do you really have a widget problem, or do you need that thing anymore? Should you keep paying for that thing, or is it doing the job? And it's tough, because you get people who've put their career or their rep on the line to say that's the right thing to do, or to buy, or to invest in. And it's tough. It's tough to unwind. Plus, you don't realize what your dependencies are after a certain point on that thing. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. A couple of parting questions, because I tied up like an extra half an hour of your time, which I appreciate. You've gotten to travel 60 countries, I think I saw.
72.
72. Wow.
Yeah.
Any tops? I mean, I'd love to hear about all of them, but any tops off the list?
Some great ones. About 15 years ago, I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro.
That's a slog, right?
Yeah, it was about a week. East Africa, beautiful. The people are incredible.
Yeah,
I have to say, I had a great time when I was there. My ancestral homeland is Norway, so I enjoy going back there.
Yeah.
We do a lot of business in Germany and Switzerland, so I enjoy going there. We have some employees that are in Eastern Europe and Belarus and Ukraine.
Yeah.
So I go there. I enjoy that. Iceland is beautiful, beautiful country.
Oh, I loved Iceland. Yeah, I got to be there as well. Spectacular.
Yeah,
Has
I
it been
mean,
hard? Has it been hard during the pandemic to not be able to scratch that travel itch?
yeah, and in fact, so the difference is the travel is just different. I'm not going as far. I've been living in my doing a lot of camping in my Forerunner, and just sort of going in the mountains and taking the
You drive a
dog. And
Forerunner?
I do, yeah,
I drive a GX 470, which is the same platform. And it's my rig.
yeah, yeah.
Get
So
around
yeah, I
stuff.
got it. I kind of did some custom stuff to it so I can sleep in it and go camping and off
I'm in the
roading.
middle of that on mine, I swear. And I like literally that's tonight's project is finally putting the deck part in.
Oh, nice, nice. Yeah,
Excellent. So you're an outdoors guy as well, obviously.
yeah. I do. I enjoy hiking and maybe I like the sports too. I like snowboarding and surfing and paddleboarding and all that stuff too. But yeah, it's just nice being outside. I like being
Oh yeah, yeah. You'll have if Seattle's becoming kind of home base, you'll have to come up and ski Mount Baker. Um,
I've heard.
it's I mean it's Cascade concrete, right? The Northwest snow is never going to stack up to Colorado or Utah, but Baker's pretty darn cool. Yeah,
Yeah,
pretty darn
yeah.
cool. Wow, 72 countries. I have a neighbor who's Danny's almost 80, and I think he said he's keeping at the one country per year of his life pace. But aside from him, I've never met anybody who's been to as many countries as you just mentioned. That's really impressive.
I really enjoy it. The different cultures that you meet, the different people that you meet are
A
just it's so
simple
fast.
man, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's funny because when you boil it down to people, that there are a lot of simple things that connect all of us. We suffer from the same difficulties, the same kinds of decisions, the stresses, the ups and downs, the losses, the wins, all of those things. We share so much in common.
Yeah,
And I think a lot of times our news and our politics will try to separate us from the humanity of people who are in other countries who are just like us.
Mhm.
And they're trying to figure out the how to survive, how to live, how to make the best lives for themselves and their families and their loved ones.
Yeah,
And that's no different from us.
yeah,
They speak different languages, they may look different from us, but humans are fundamentally very similar, I think, in what we're trying to do. We all see ourselves as the protagonist of our story and trying to make the best for ourselves. And I think when you travel, you see different kinds of people. And that's not to say that everyone's a good person, or I mean, obviously you have to be careful and safe when you travel, but especially in some countries. But I think when you approach that from a sense of respect and wanting to learn about other people and other cultures, the experience is it's so eye-opening, and it just changes your world. It changes the way you see everyone and everything. And it's really, for as big of a planet as it is, and the fact that there's 7 billion people here, I think that once you travel and you're exposed to these different kinds of cultures and thinkings and religions and everything else, you see so much of a common thread that binds us all together. And I really enjoy that. I enjoy the seeing the things that, I mean, I think if anyone's ever been to Angkor Wat and walked through that temple in Cambodia, I mean, it's incredible. As much as it is going to the killing fields in Cambodia, which are moving in such a different kind of a way. And so when you see these things, seeing these massive churches or temples that have been built, these huge things that have been created by humans, it's truly remarkable what people have created. And so it's a very humbling experience, I think, when you run into so many different kinds of people and experiences all over the world. And so I'm very grateful that I've had the chance to do that and work from anywhere as I've traveled. So it's been if people haven't had a chance to travel in their lives, like, it's one of those things I would recommend everyone. If you have an opportunity to go, do it.
yeah, yeah. Wow, that was eloquently put. Really was.
No, thank you.
Really was. That was wonderful. I'm going to wrap it up and get Lars off the hook here. But Lars, it was a real pleasure talking with you. Thank you so much for making the time today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It was a great conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Okay, I'm going to call wrap on recording. Thanks all.